Hey Phil, hey Joe.
How are you?
Good to be here.
Yes, I'm so happy to have you both here. Welcome to this
Thank
podcast.
you.
Thank you indeed.
And we are in the University of Tartu, in the center of Delta. It's a brand new house building, and we're having this conference here. So awesome, very nice to be here. I literally don't even know how to introduce you guys. So I'm just going to start from somewhere, and you can just add then what you feel is appropriate or you deem appropriate.
Okay.
I know, of course, Mary Jo much better than Phil. You, I just met Phil. Mary Jo, you have been 30 or even more years involved in academia.
Yeah, but who's counting?
Who's counting? Yes. I read that you have over 33,000 sightings of your academic work.
Yeah, I heard that.
So that's a lot.
But again, who's counting?
Who's counting? And your primary interests, research interests, and also teaching interests have been around organizational culture, identity, branding, and I also know that you've worked on humor,
Yes.
arts,
Yes, absolutely. That's my passion currently.
jazz,
Yeah.
paintings, stuff like that. So yeah, combining different interdisciplinary fields, studying organizations and organizing. And Phil, you have background in psychology.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I started out as an academic and went through the PhD studies, into the classroom, and so on. And along the way, one of the leaders of my school, the business school dean, said, "I'm working with a company. And they're interesting fellows. They've got an interesting business. They have some big ideas about changing the world with their business." He said, when I talk to them, it's like the grandfather talking to them. You're about their age. So he introduced me, and I began to work with two real guys, Ben and Jerry of the Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream Company.
Seriously?
Yeah. So
Awesome.
I sort of got one foot in academia and one foot in business, and I haven't taken that foot out of business since then. It was a great fun working with Ben and Jerry, and they make good ice cream, and they also have strong political statements, which was unusual for a business then, and still is.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, absolutely.
But I've tasted Ben & Jerry's. That's good. And they do have it in Estonia here.
Yeah, no, it's arrived. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. The secret is the chunks.
Yeah.
The add-ins, ice cream. Ice cream is fine, but then chocolate, blueberries, pretzels, and so on.
All sorts of stuff in there.
Absolutely.
But what about your organizational psychology background? Maybe you can just a little bit give a
Sure. People often, when you ask them, what's your job, you say, I'm an organizational psychologist. They either start telling you their problems or want to lie on a bench and tell their story. I said, no, that's not my job.
Yeah.
I'm not a therapist, at least not a formal therapist. I study not individuals, but what happens when people come together in an organization. And there's great differences. There's differences, obviously, in size and how tall they are, and whether they're more or less community-minded or just profit-oriented. And as Joe knows all too well, very different cultures.
Yeah.
And that becomes an area of study and sometimes to helping people.
So you are currently also involved in helping clients in different organizational change projects.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so what I would be really interested, and this is an awesome opportunity for me to dig into this, is maybe you guys can share some of the stories, some of the experiences that you have had while working with organizations, studying organizations, and maybe the overall kind of a topic or kind of framework to think about as culture or values. Like I know managers are talking a lot about organizational culture and building organizational culture, creating culture. Anything that pops up in your mind right now, what kind of associations do you have immediately?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is, are people really now talking about creating culture? Because when I was working with organizations, what they wanted to do was change their culture.
Okay.
And I mean, this may be very old knowledge. Phil's probably more the person to talk about creating culture, because I saw him actually do it. But in the culture change area, what I had to always do was disabuse managers of how easy that would be. And the only two ways I know to change culture are to fire about half your employees and bring in a whole new crew. And that will instantly change your culture, but you can't control in what direction. Or you can wait 25 years and slowly evolve through your influence the direction that the culture is going to take. But other than that, it's not really possible to just, I'll come in on Tuesday and change your culture for you. But it's interesting to me that you ask about creating culture. I'm very gladdened to hear that the managers you're talking to are thinking in those terms, because that's really important and becoming more important as we move into this new age of who knows what's going to happen next with Zoom and, remote work and internationalization. I mean, the things are really, really different. I'm kind of glad I'm retired so I don't have to deal with it all. But maybe you can talk about creating culture.
Well, there are two kinds of experiences I've had. One is the Ben & Jerry's is a startup story.
Yeah.
Where, there's an entrepreneurial mindset. There are not a lot of resources, so everybody has to make do and make quick adaptations. The structure is very informal and so on. So the only thing that holds it together is this passion to get to market and make this product succeed or make this service succeed, number one. And secondly, to have a sense that we're all in this together. We're not just working for the investor or the boss. We're all in this together. And that's a great energy, and most startups have a kind of passion about them. What's tricky is either when they hit their first wall, boom, okay, we need to get more control in the system, somebody's got to watch the money closer, we need more accountability, and so on. And that makes it very difficult to preserve that we're all in this together environment, because oftentimes you start getting people called managers involved in looking over things and so on. And the other part of that is, of course, when you're succeeding wildly. You went from 10 people to 30 people to 50 people to 90 people. And suddenly you've got a whole number of people that have different perspectives and outlooks and aspirations. And the old timers remember the good old days. And, the good old days could have been 2 years ago. But nonetheless, the new ones, they don't work as hard as we did. They're not sweating like we did, et cetera, et cetera. And it's almost like a generational shift.
Yeah. So it's life cycle also connected with the organizational life cycle.
As organizations grow, their cultures either adapt or they die and get replaced.
Yeah. And what about the influence of a founder, or let's say founders? What comes to mind about this topic?
I mean, I think about Lego Group.
Yeah.
They have a powerful founder story, as does Johnson & Johnson. Where the founder somehow is kept alive in the minds and hearts of the employees, at least for very many generations of leadership. At Lego, it was a family-owned company I think it still is, actually. But they brought in management that wasn't part of the family for the first time about 10, 15 years ago. And that was a profound change for them, but they needed somebody younger to take charge because the company was getting old and stodgy. So he came in, started doing, he'd worked for Lego for quite a while, so he knew the culture, he knew the people. But he started doing sort of the normal managerial things that you do to make the place work more efficiently, et cetera, et cetera. And one day somebody came into his office, tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Come with me. And he took him over to Lego House, which was the actual place where the founder had lived, or actually it was the founder's father had lived. He was a toy maker, a wooden toy maker. And they had preserved the house that he built, and inside of it were a lot of family artifacts. And, Jorn V. Knudstorp was the CEO at that time, and he said, I think we could probably do away with this. We could sell this property off and make a little money, and who needs this anymore? The guy said, please look around. So he's looking at all this stuff, and he sees these hand-carved toys, and he finds this sign, hand-carved wooden sign, that says the best is never good enough, or something along those lines. It was in Danish, of course. And suddenly Jorn V. has this moment when he realizes what the connection to the past really is for this company, and the fact that this employee had dragged him over there made him realize that this is something important. So instead of selling the place, he grabs the sign, takes it back to his office, and tacks it up behind his chair to remind him that this is a company with a very long heritage that is highly appreciated by the employees. And he starts to turn the organization around as a result of sort of getting what the place was about. So I think that's an excellent founder story. Johnson & Johnson is another one.
Yeah.
They have the founder's grandson, I believe, wrote the credo originally. And they've been using this credo as, to sort of culturally say, this is what we're about and this is what really matters. And
it's an interesting one, too, because it's not about money. That's
not at all.
Investors are number 6 on the list.
Is it?
First, it's doctors, patients, nurses.
So stakeholders have been put on the
rank order.
And this happened, 100 years ago?
100 years ago, yeah.
And the interesting thing about it, founder-wise, is that Johnson & Johnson has become behemoth. I mean, it's gigantic. And they periodically have so many new employees that people don't respect the culture or understand where any of this came from. So they have, from time to time when this happens, whoever is the CEO has said, okay, if we're not going to live by the credo, we're going to get rid of it because we don't want to be hypocritical. So they put out a blanket statement. We're going to have a debate about whether to keep the credo or get rid of it. Instantly, all the old guard tells the young guard why they're going to keep the credo, and they reinvigorate the culture and move on. And of course, they all vote for it.
So it's almost like a matter of are we gonna preserve the past and reinvigorate it, or we go by a different route or different avenue?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's always a founding story, and often a mythology. As to who our ancestors are and what they believed and so on, and sometimes gets embedded in the Constitution and is certainly taught in the elementary schools and high schools and so on. And so at Walt Disney, for example, for 20 years after Walt died, people would say, well, what would Walt want? And that became a kind of ethical guidepost. Now, sometimes it's completely fake. So you go to Walmart, and Sam Walton, he was a miserable human being. He would take as much money as he could from the suppliers.
Seriously,
he didn't pay well, but he as a business, he gave you branded goods, something with a label on it, for an affordable price. Before, you could only buy a Levi's or a Tommy Hilfiger shirt at a fine department store, but Sam got it for you cheap. So the customers loved him, but nobody else did. He was a mean son of a gun. And now, of course, I don't know if you knew, Sam was very environmentally friendly. Sam loved his people. So this whole story has been reinvented as to who Sam Walton really was.
Well, Lever Brothers.
Yeah, the Lever Brothers, another example. Yeah. So there's a fake story too.
Yeah, but I like this question that whenever you are in a crisis or in a situation where you don't know what to do, you have, even if it's imaginary, you have someone, it can be a god,
Often a god.
Yeah, you can ask, what would this person do in this situation?
Sure.
And you might have a good answer. So
Well, typically the gods did. There were both sides. They embodied what we thought best about who we are and our principles of living, and they also had a sword. If you didn't live that way, boom.
True. Yeah. Would you think about Elon Musk, by the way?
Boy, what happened to him when he went up in space? Because he came down a different person.
Yeah, it's a complicated character. I mean, I was talking to some colleagues of mine, and they referred me to an article where he was talking about his going to space and other. He says, well, we're like a philanthropy. We're doing this for the well-being and of people, and we have these electric cars. You know, it's a good thing and generous thing we're doing for them. And you know, and they said, what about Twitter? Oh, we're opening up new forms of communication and so on and so on. And it sounds like spin.
Yeah.
And I don't to me the issue is not just what product you make, but what values are in your culture, how are people treated, how are you as a human being, and so on. And I love Tesla cars, but the management style, the cultural values, and so on, and the self-absorption of Musk don't sound to me like the founding ideals that I'd like to see emulated.
Yeah.
But he's a hero.
But definitely there is also a connection to personal branding, right? How the personal brand will somehow spill over to everything that you are connected with. That's also an interesting topic.
The founder leaves an imprint.
Yeah.
And I think that imprint lives on regardless of what you do to spin it or doctor it or anything else, because it's embedded in the physical artifacts of the company. And even if you give away your office space, there's still going to be things that are memories of the past that take you to those values again, that reinvigorate them. And when somebody denies those or subverts them, you feel the inauthenticity of it. You feel that something's off. And so you begin to try and diagnose what's off because it's uncomfortable to feel that way. And eventually the whole thing comes undone.
Yeah. I mean, there's also contradictions that are tricky. So every school child in the United States knows the Declaration of Independence, and the idea that we're all created equal, et cetera, et cetera. But in truth, that's not our founding story. That's what we said, but we had slavery, we had domination, killing of the Native Americans, et cetera. None of that is sort of a part of that founding story. And each generation has to confront the contradictions that were there and what those mean. And this is kind of an interesting idea that business is facing now. So, you hear companies, well, what's your purpose? Well, it can't just be about making money. We've got to have a noble purpose, some product that we're providing that helps humanity, or some ideals that we're living in the way the workforce is. But nonetheless, it's still about making money. And how can you find a way to reconcile those or refresh them or think about them in a new way where they're not two counter stories, they're part of a larger story that's relevant for today.
Yeah, so you find an alignment between the kind of let's say the mission or the kind of the higher purpose, if you will.
Yes, ideally.
And the kind of economic engine or let's say the financial side.
I think some companies are cursed from birth by the ambitions of their founder.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I shouldn't say this out loud, maybe Ford has always disappointed me. At every turn when they have a major decision to make, it seems to me they make it always in favor of making money over doing the right thing. And so you get, the fires in the Pinto for a while were a big deal, and then you have exploding tires on the Explorer, so that they now call the Explorer the Exploder.
Do they? Yeah.
Yeah. And if I had a colleague who was working for Ford at one point, and when the Pinto fires happened, he was privy to all the discussions that went on in management. In fact, I think he was one of the ones that alerted management that these fires were taking place. And I kid you not, they did a cost-benefit analysis and decided it was cheaper to pay people who were killed in these fires than it was to fix the problem.
Wow.
He's now written an ethics business case about this, so it's all public knowledge. But, I mean, that's sort of an instance where somebody just got it wrong from the beginning, and it continued throughout the life of the organization. What I saw them do to Volvo, for instance, really disappointed me.
Yeah, they often say that you can really tell the true values of a company when you have a crisis, or you go into an economic recession,
or comes to mind Enron.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Enron.
I mean,
that was a total con job.
They're just crooks. At the same time, they were recognized as one of the country's most responsible businesses because they gave a lot to charity.
Yeah.
Well, so did U.S. Steel. Andrew Carnegie.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's a ruthless businessman, but on the same time, he gave his money to create a library system in the United States.
Yeah, but what comes to my mind right now, and what would be really, I think, practical for listeners as well, would be like, what should a person do in the moment they are in a crossroad? And we all, at some point in our life, are in a crossroad where we have to make a decision, right? You know in your gut what is the right thing to do. But at the same time, it's somehow so attractive also to go the other way. Mm-hmm. So can you get yourself into that position? What kind of advice would you give to a manager who is in this position?
Yeah. Well, there's two or three terms that people use. I mean, we're talking about, in human terms, your conscience or your gut. You know the right thing. On the other hand, this other option looks mighty appealing.
Exactly, exactly.
Big win. Sinning has its rewards, et cetera, et cetera. There's two or three things people say. One is to actually get into your guts, to pay some attention to your feelings. Think through deeply, how this story would play out 5-10 years. What will you tell your children 10 years from now if they were confronted with this situation, and so on, to try to sort of wake people up to listen to that inside voice. The other thing they talk about is to actually look at it from the outside, from the balcony. Don't look at it on the floor where you are, where you can see this road crossing, but get up at the balcony and see where the roads are going, and look at yourself. What seems to be motivating you to, and so on. So it's nothing other than to know thyself and know thy situation.
So it's like self-awareness.
It's not only self-awareness, but situation awareness. Sometimes it is too good to be true. This proposition that's being laid out for you, and so on. But these are they're both the moral choices that people make, but they're also life choices.
Yes.
That they have to live with.
I mean, I'd take a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle, and just say, if I went this way, who would I be? And if I went that way, who would I be?
So it's almost like what kind of a person I will become if I make choice to that side or to that side.
Yeah. Or even what kind of a person would make this choice.
Okay, yeah.
And what kind of a person would make that choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at salespeople, they don't want you to do that kind of reflecting. Say, well, I want to think about it. Well, I got another 10% off if you sign now.
Yeah. But that's a really nice exercise in a way as well.
Yeah. Well, it helps also to get an outsider's perspective.
Yeah, if you really can't make a choice, go talk to 10 people that from various backgrounds.
Yeah, several successful people I know have what they call their own board of directors. These are people I meet with, maybe every quarter, and we do some, and not just here for me, sometimes we talk about them too, so it's more of a support group. But that's an extraordinary gift to have as you live your life, to have others' perspective, and also to share your perspectives with others.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're not so clear about it until you actually say it, and they hear it.
Yeah, so even speaking out loud.
Absolutely.
Verbalizing what struggles you have, inner struggles, might be already kind of clarifying
Absolutely.
experience.
You sound like a psychologist.
Well, the really frightening thing is the person who doesn't ever notice they have a struggle.
Yeah, well, yeah, can happen.
Oh, sure.
It can
Well,
happen.
you're back to sales. You know, don't take the time. Only going to be trouble.
Yeah.
Go, go, go.
Oh, it's really revealing and insightful to talk to you guys. Anything else that I haven't maybe asked, but you think, oh, I would love to bring this on the table as well?
Well, one thing that I find interesting is in the old days, quote unquote, the ideal was you go to work for a company, and maybe that's even for your whole life. That has changed. And I think that's there's some good and some bad in that. One of the things that's changed, of course, is the companies aren't around that long anymore. They'll get ready, yeah. But the other is, I think there's some magical things happen as you get exposed to different kinds of companies. You learn better where you do best. You learn that there's different ways to do things, and so on. So that and there's no shame for me in the idea that I got here and it didn't work. I wasn't effective, or even I got fired.
Yeah.
That's okay. Go to another situation.
Yeah, so the span of one engagement has shortened a lot.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and then now they are talking about the era of, I don't remember the term, but like the era of
We have a portfolio career.
yeah, portfolio career.
One expression, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Resignation, era of resignation.
Oh, yes,
yeah,
yes.
Great resignation, yeah, absolutely. Well, that's people asking questions about, is this all I am? Who do I want to be?
Well, and young people growing up and seeing how their parents lived and saying, I want none of that. You know, it doesn't look like fun to me.
Yeah, I maybe I shouldn't say this, but I have parents who say that work is work because it's dull. But I don't think it has to be like that.
No.
Yeah.
Well, that's the advantage, and the irony is kids that are 20 years younger with you will look at you and say, what's this guy doing?
Exactly.
Just stupid. Look how he dressed. His taste in music. Now, they may be more conservative.
Yeah.
That's what some argue, is the next generation disease, if you will, may actually be more conservative.
Anyway, thank you guys.
Sure.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Bill. It's been an awesome time to share some experiences and your wisdom. So
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
yes.